Chapter 7 of Audrey Craven by May Sinclair. This Librivox recording is in the public domain. Recording by expatriate in Bangor, Maine. Chapter 7. When Katherine came back from the National Gallery she found Ted alone. He had drawn up the couch in front of his easel and lay there gazing at his portrait. The restless, hungry look had gone from his eyes. There was no triumph there, only an absolute satisfaction and repose. Face and attitude said plainly, "I have attained my heart's desire. I am young in years but old in wisdom. I know what faith and hope and love are, which is more than you do. I am not in the least excited about them, as you see. I can afford to wait, for these things last forever. If you like, you may come and worship with me before my heavenly lady's image, but if you do, you must hold your tongue." And Katherine, being a sensible woman, held her tongue. But she took up a tiny pair of white gloves, stained with paint and turpentine, that lay folded on the easel's ledge, and after examining them critically, laid them on Ted's feet without a word. A faint smile flickered across his lips. That was all their confession. After some inward debate, Katherine determined to go over and see Audrey. She had no very clear notion of what had happened that morning, but she could only think that the ridiculous boy had proposed to Audrey and been accepted. The idea seemed preposterous, for though she had been by no means blind to all that had been going on under her eyes for the last few months, she had never for a moment taken Audrey seriously, or supposed that Ted in his sober senses could do so either. This morning a horrible misgiving had come over her, and she had gone to her work in a tumult of mixed feelings. For the present she had made Ted's career the end and aim of her existence. What she most dreaded for him, next to the pain of a hopeless attachment, was the distraction of a successful one. A premature engagement is the thing of all others to blast a man's career at the outset. What good was it, she asked herself passionately, for her to pinch and save, to put aside her own ambition, to do the journeyman's work that brings pay, instead of the artist's work that brings praise, if Ted was going to fling himself away on the first pretty face that took his fancy? Again the feeling of hatred to Audrey surged up in her heart, and again it died down at the first sight of its object. Audrey was standing at the window singing a little song to herself. She turned as the door opened, and when she saw Katherine she started ever so slightly, and stood at gaze like a frightened fawn. She was attracted by Katherine, as she was by every personality that she felt to be stronger than her own. Among all artists there is a strain of manhood in every woman, and of womanhood in every man. Katherine fascinated her weaker sister by some such super feminine charm. At the same time Audrey was afraid of her, as she had been afraid of Hardy in his passion, or of Ted in his boisterous mirth. There were moments when she thought that Katherine's direct unquestioning gaze must have seen what she hid from her own eyes, must have penetrated the more or less artistic disguises without which she would not have known herself. Now her one anxiety was lest Katherine knew or guessed her treatment of Vincent, and had come to reproach her with it. Owing to some slight similarity of detail, the events of the morning had brought the recollection of that last scene with Hardy uppermost in her mind. She had persuaded herself that her love for Ted was her first experience of passion, as it was his. But at the touch of one awkward memory the bloom was somehow brushed off this little romance. For these reasons there was fear in her grey eyes as she put up her face to Katherine's to be kissed. "Do you know?" she half whispered. "Has he told you?" "No, he has told me nothing. But I know." There was silence as the two women sat down side by side and looked into each other's faces. Katherine's instinct was to soothe and protect the shy creatures that shrank from her. And Audrey in her doubt and timidity appealed to her more than she had ever done in the self conscious triumph of her beauty. She took her hand, caressing it gently as she spoke. "Audrey, you won't mind telling me frankly, are you engaged to Ted?" True to her imitative instincts, Audrey could be frank with the frank. "Yes, I am. But it's our own little secret, and we don't want anybody to know yet." "Perhaps you are wise." She paused. How could she make Audrey understand what she had to say? She was not going to ask her to break off her engagement. In the first place, she had no right to do so. In the second place, any interference in these cases is generally fatal to its own ends. But she wanted to make Audrey realize the weight of her responsibility. "Audrey," she said at last, Do you remember our first meeting when you thought Ted was a baby?" "Yes, of course I do. That was only 6, 7 months ago. And to think that I should be engaged to him now. Isn't it funny?" "Very funny indeed. But you were perfectly right. He is a baby. He knows no more than a baby does of the world and of the men in it. Of the women he knows rather less than an intelligent baby." "I wouldn't have him different. He needn't know anything about other women, so long as he understands me." "Well, the question is, does he understand himself? What's more, are you sure you understand him? Ted is two people rolled into one, and very badly rolled, too. The human part of him has hardly begun to grow yet. He's got no practical common sense to speak of, and only a rudimentary heart." "Oh, Katherine!" "Quite true. It's all I had at his age. But the ideal, the artistic side of him is all but full grown. That means that it's just at the critical stage now." "Of course. I suppose it would be." Audrey always said "of course" when she especially failed to see the drift of what was said to her. "Yes, but do you realize all that the next few years will do for him? That they will either make or ruin his career as an artist? They ought to be years of downright hard work, of solitary hard work. He ought to have them all to himself. Do you mean to let him have them?" Audrey lowered her eyes and sat silent, playing with the ribbons of her dress, while Katherine went on as if to herself "He is so young, so dreadfully young. It would have been soon enough in another 10 years' time. Oh, Audrey, why did you let it come to this?" "Well, really, Katherine, I couldn't help it. Besides, one has one's feelings. You talk as if I was going to stand in Ted's way. As if I didn't care a straw. Surely his career must mean more to his wife than it can to his sister. I know you think that because I haven't been trained like you, because I've lived a different life from yours, that I can't love art as you do. You're mistaken. To begin with, I made up my mind 10 years ago that whatever I did when I grew up, I wouldn't marry a nonentity. What do you suppose Ted's fascination was, if it wasn't his genius, and his utter unlikeness to anybody else?" "Geniuses are common enough nowadays. There are plenty more where he came from." "How cynical you are! You haven't met many people like Ted, have you?" "No, I haven't. Oh, Audrey, do you really care like that? I wonder how I should feel if I were you, and knew that Ted's future lay in my hands as it lies in yours." Audrey's cheeks reddened with pleasure. "It does, it does." She clasped her little hands passionately, as if they were holding Ted and his future tight. "I know it. All I want is to inspire him, to keep him true to himself. Haven't I done it? You know what his work was like before he loved me. Can you say that he ever painted better than he does now, or even one half as well?" Katherine could not honestly say that he had, but she smiled as she answered "No, but for the last 6 months he has done nothing from anybody but yourself. You make a very charming picture, Audrey, but you can hardly want people to say that your husband can only paint one type." "My husband can paint as many types as he pleases." Katherine still looked dubious. "Anything more?" "Yes, one thing. You say you want to keep Ted true to himself, as you put it. He made up his mind this morning to go to Paris to study hard for 6 months. It means a lot of self sacrifice for you both, to be separated so soon. But it will be the making of him. You won't let him change his mind? You won't say anything to keep him back, will you?" Audrey's face had suddenly grown hard, and she looked away from Katherine as she answered "You're not very consistent, I must say. You can't think Ted such an utter baby if you trust him to go off to Paris all by himself. As to his making up his mind this morning, our engagement alters all that. After all, how can it affect Ted's career if he goes now or 3 years hence?" "It makes all the difference." "I can't see it. And yet I wouldn't spoil Ted's chances for worlds." She rose and walked a few paces to and fro. "Let me think, let me think." She stood still, an image of abstract justice, with one hand folded over her eyes, and the other clenched as if it held the invisible scales of destiny, weighing her present, overcharged with agreeable sensations, against her lover's future. Apparently, after some shifting of the weights, she had made the two balance, for she clapped her hands suddenly and exclaimed with an emphasis on every other word "Katherine, an inspiration! We'll go to Paris for our honeymoon, and Ted shall stay there 6 months, a year, for ever, if he likes. Paris is the place I adore above all others. I shall simply live in that dear Louvre."
She added in more matter of fact tones, "And I needn't order my trousseau till I get there. That'll save no end of bother on this side. I hate the way we do things here. For weeks before your wedding day to have to think of nothing but clothes, clothes, clothes. Could anything be more revolting?" "Yes," said Katherine. "To think of them before a funeral." Audrey looked offended. Death, like religion, is one of those subjects which it is very bad taste to mention under some circumstances. Katherine went away more disheartened than ever, and more especially weighed down by the consciousness that she had made a fool of herself. She knew Audrey to be vain, she divined that she was selfish, but at least she had believed that she could be generous. By letting her feel that she held Ted's future in her hands, she had roused all her woman's vague cupidity and passion for power, and henceforth any appeal to her generosity would be worse than useless. With a little of her old artistic egoism, Katherine valued her brother's career very much as a thing of her own making, and the idea of another woman meddling with it and spoiling it was insupportable. It was as if some reckless colourist had taken the Witch of Atlas and daubed her all over with frightful scarlet and magenta. But the trouble at her heart of hearts was the certainty that Audrey, that creature of dubious intellect and fitful emotions, would never be able to love Ted as his wife should love him. End of Chapter 7. Recording by Expatriate in Bangor, Maine.